Tina, is the motion to get back out, is that, did you email that to
It's,
me?
I think there were 2 pages, so it would be on that second
Okay.
page.
Brian. Look at page 2.
Indeed.
Cena's usually keep us on track with them.
Well, right now, we don't have the camera in the city council chambers on.
Oh,
Now,
Are we ready to go, folks? All right. So, we need to come out of closed session.
All right. So I move that the city council members certify by a recorded vote that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Is there a second?
second.
Okay, Ms. Thomas, will you take the vote on this motion?
Counselor McGill,
yes,
Counselor Payne,
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston,
Yes.
Mayor Snook,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Wade.
Yes.
All right, so we are now out of closed session and back into open session for the 6:30 session. And first of all, I apologize to folks that were about 10 minutes late getting back. We were not just sitting around eating bonbons, but we're actually doing important stuff. So anyway, thank you all for sticking with us. We'll begin the 6:30 business meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you. Councilors, any announcements?
One announcement, Mayor, I was asked to make earlier this evening. The Green Grannies on October 22nd at 11 a.m. at Ix Art Park will be holding a Get Out the Vote event for the climate. And so asked to make that announcement, so
So October 22nd, which is a Saturday, at what time?
11 a.m. at Ix Art Park.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? That's next up.
okay.
We're getting some feedback someplace. Okay. There is one other announcement that came out this afternoon that the city is seeking a holiday tree donation for the 25th anniversary of Grand Illumination. As the date for the Grand Illumination, Friday, December 2nd, 5 to 8 p.m. quickly approaches, the city of Charlottesville is seeking donations for a holiday tree. They're looking for a conifer, a white pine, spruce, or fir, 15 to 20 feet tall, 10 to 12 feet in diameter, hopefully without obvious disease, wounds, or bare spots. If you know of such a tree, please contact Steve Gaines, urban forester with Charlottesville Parks and Rec. Let's see. Next was going to be, I guess, are there any items for recognition? We don't have any proclamations, but recognitions. Is there a motion regarding board and commission appointments? Who's going to? We have one.
Yes. It.
This is for CACPP?
Yeah,
Yes.
CACVB. We were going to nominate Danny O'Shea.
Yes.
It's just Shay, not O'Shea.
Okay, Danny Shea. Thank you.
I move that we nominate Danny Shea for the Charlottesville Albemarle Visitors and Tourism Board as a
CACVB.
Charlottesville representative.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Okay, that passes, and Mr. Shea is appointed. Next up, Ms. Thomas, you want to read the consent agenda, please?
Consent agenda. 3, minutes, August 15th, council meeting. 4, resolution, Virginia Department of Social Services, temporary aid to needy families grants, $100,000, second reading. 5, resolution, housing opportunities for people with AIDS, HIV grant agreement, $3,981, second reading. 6, resolution, Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless, reimbursement of funds for staff costs to support the homeless information line, $15,381.60, second reading. 7, resolution, appropriation of $656,000 of CARES funding for the Charlottesville Area Transit, second reading. 8, resolution, appropriation from Charlottesville Area Transit local funding to Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission to support the governance study, $30,000, second reading. 9, resolution, appropriating Charlottesville Supplemental Rental Assistance Program funding for the acquisition of 818 Montrose Avenue, $355,000, second reading. 10, resolution appropriating fiscal year 2023 fire programs aid to locality, fire fund, $186,776, one of two readings. 11, resolution appropriating funding from the Virginia Department of Social Services for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Education and Training Program, Laptop Loaner Program, one of two readings. 12, resolution appropriating American Rescue Plan funds from the Commonwealth for utility bill assistance, $29,524.18, one of two readings.
Okay, so we will now take public comment regarding the items on the consent agenda that were just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. In the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you have joined by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, just press star 9. And this is only for those last 10 items that were read and that were shown up on the screen. If you are one of those who has signed up for the regular community matters section, this is not your time. That'll be in a few minutes. Is there anybody who would like to speak on any of the matters on the consent agenda? Anybody in person? Seeing nobody in person, is there anybody online who would like to speak as to any of those matters?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands.
All right, so we will close the public hearing aspect of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, any further questions or comments from council? Ms. Thomas, will you take the vote, please?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes?
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, it passes 5-0 to adopt the consent agenda. Mr. Rogers, is there a report from the city manager's office?
Yes, sir. We have provided a written report. This is the first meeting of the month, so we have that report, but I have some other announcements I'd like to make. First, the bus driver shortage facing the entire country has presented so many colleagues challenges for communities for a few years now. And only those communities with careful planning and resources have been able to remain attentive to the issues this shortage causes. Charlottesville continues to be a city where additional steps are being taken to stabilize the workforce and demonstrate to our team that we strive to be the employer of choice in the region. In addition to the 2 recruitment and retention bonuses that was implemented last year with council support, I am today announcing a major shift in the compensation structure for operators, transit and pupil, bus aides, transit bus technicians, transit maintenance workers as well. These changes will be effective today, and the staff has been notified. Operator pay for transit and pupil drivers will now start at $21 per hour. Bus aid pay will now start at $18 per hour. All bus drivers with more than a year's service, along with technicians and maintenance personnel will receive a 12% market adjustment to demonstrate the city's support for their continued efforts to provide service to our community. The city of Charlottesville and the region need public transportation. And I'm proud of the efforts of the men and women at CAT who stood by us and worked with us. And we hope that this pay increase will continue to provide incentive and will draw back the people we need to assure that we have a stable, reliable public transportation system for the citizens in this community. And so we need 20 in transit, 25 in pupil operators. So let the word go out. CAT is hiring. Come on back.
Yeah, if I could just say a word or two. Thank you and thank staff, Sam Sanders in particular and Garland Williams.
Yes.
I want the community to know that when things are raised like this, there are conversations that happen and we really want to be responsive. So thank you.
Thank you, and I thank the support of council on this. And let me just add a caveat. We are able to fund this from CAT's budget because of the vacancies that we have. However, we are enjoying some success in filling those vacancies. So the extent to which we are truly successful in filling the positions, we will be back for some more money from council to fund this going forward.
Understood.
All right? Okay. Chief
Mr.
Smith?
Rogers?
Yes.
I have one question on that 12%. Is that 12% of what people are making now? Or 12% above the new raised pay?
That's 12% based on the current pay, because this is we're dealing with compression on this. Sam, do you have a different answer on that?
No, sir, that is correct. It's a 12% increase to ensure that as everyone shifts, as the drivers and the bus aides and the mechanic shift, everyone else that's also in that section will shift along with them.
So we will make sure, I just want to be very clear with the public and everybody that we are making sure that previous employees will be above the new starting.
That's correct.
Yep.
So that, and if for anybody ends up that not that case, that is not supposed to be the case. So please, just in case, let me throw in another case.
Yeah.
Continuing, Chief, as you know, it's been reported that Fire Chief Smith has plans to leave us and go back to Florida. We will be meeting, Deputy City Manager Sanders and I will be meeting with him this week to discuss transition, and we will focus on identifying a acting chief, as well as developing a process for the selection of a recruitment and selection of a new chief. So we'll be getting back to you on that. Today, we launched a new City Hall Ambassador Program. All visitors will be greeted by the ambassadors upon entering the main entrance to City Hall from the downtown mall. If you are conducting business with the Treasurer's Office, the Commissioner of Revenue, or the Utility Billing Office, you will be able to access those customer service areas directly. All other guests will be asked to check in and receive a visitor's badge. This is part of our post-pandemic opening for sure. And I note too that the entrance to Neighborhood Development Services from 7th Street from Market Street will be open, and those having business there should go to that door and be greeted to a new conference room set up so that people are not standing in the hall. We have, as council has recently supported the lifting of the emergency order, I have asked our leadership team to achieve a reopened status effective today. We will continue to afford some staff the opportunity to work in a hybrid posture. These employees have been asked to develop a hybrid work plan and execute specific agreements to support their in-office and remote schedules. My last statement is the city manager's office is in constant communication with the Charlottesville Police Department about any incidents that occur in our community. My ultimate goal is to ensure that our community and its residents are safe. Please know that I am aware of the incidents of firearm violence that have occurred in the recent month, including the tragedy that occurred on the 17th and the most recent incident on the 28th, where those victims are in stable condition. Our officers are currently investigating both cases and would like to ensure the public that the incidents pose no immediate threat to our community. I'm thankful to announce that Charlottesville Police Department and the Albemarle County Police Department are working together to address the current uptick in firearm violence within our community, as they both realize that there are no jurisdictional lines with offenders. Both departments are working together to have more intentional informational sharing on these incidents. In addition, I am aware of the 2 swatting incidents that occurred within our city school system last week. On the 19th at the Charlottesville High School and on the 20th at Beaufort Middle School. It is an unfortunate act of cowardice that multiple school districts in the Commonwealth had to work through this. And the acting chief, Durrett, has given me notice that the FBI is looking into these incidents across the state, and our own investigation is ongoing. I would like to thank our police and fire departments for their quick response to each school's perimeter, for conducting a thorough searches to ensure that both reports were a hoax, and for the Charlottesville city school system's desire to continue to work alongside our public safety departments to ensure safety of our students and teachers. Swatting is a deceptive tactic wherein an individual prompts an emergency response from first responders by calling in a false report. This illegal act, often, as we saw in our 2 cases, involves a threat or possible danger to public safety. I also recognize that swatting can create needless trauma and emotional distress in our community. These incidents can be frightening for all involved, including our parents. Please know that I have confirmed that our police and fire departments are engaging in these incidents using 21st century best practices, that we will continue to work along Charlottesville schools to ensure that all parties are ready to respond and aware of what the response may look like. To enhance that work, my office continues to work towards engaging an emergency manager to work alongside several other professionals to ensure that the city continues to be ready to respond to emergency in natural disasters or not, or other disasters in the community. The city has already engaged in much work focused on these issues, including working on the update of our continuity of operations plan. Finally, I would like to remind our community that if they have any information on these incidents or others, please call our Crime Spotters hotline, 434-977-4000. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. That's the end of my announcements for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I just wanted to add one other little detail that folks might find of interest. Not only are we saluting Chief Smith for his service to our area for the last 2 years, but we also have some new leaders in the Charlottesville Fire Department. New battalion chiefs Chad Bingler, Lance Blakey, and Mark Ellis. And Lance Blakey has the distinction of being the first African American to serve in this capacity in the Charlottesville Fire Department. They're all highly qualified folks to hold these positions, and we're in good hands. So I'm sorry that Chief Smith is leaving us. I think he has, as I said to him shortly after his departure became known, I've been impressed since he's been here at the level of detail that we get from him about how quickly the response came and just what the department has done in the very critical area, of course, of fire response. It's actually the thing that they do the least of all of their activities, but it's the one that everybody notices, and if something gets screwed up, that's the one where there's hell to pay. So they're doing a good job, and Chief Smith has done a good job for us.
Mayor Snook, I just want to note that for Battalion Chief Blakey, that I think he's the first African American in 166 years. I just wanted to note the length of time, and that it's an excellent promotion. He's been out in the community doing wonderful things, but we had a meeting Friday night, some community leaders to address some of the issues of the violence that you spoke of, and he was there, and I think he's just a wonderful addition to the leadership of the Charlottesville Fire Department. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question, please? I know this is not one that can be answered on the spot, but I'm just wanting to put it out there and ask you and others, Mr. City Manager, to just think about this sort of blue sky ideas about protecting places like 10th and Page from what I'll just call terrorizing violence that's happening that seems to be random or it's unclear what even the point of it is except to shoot up an area. I'm sure there are more, causes than what I'm alluding to, but I don't know how we prevent that sort of thing, but it seems like that it's coming from outside of the community into our community. Maybe that's wrong, I don't know, but I would be interested in future conversations that we have with you. If the chief has any suggestions about, I don't know, additional forces we could bring to bear, maybe someone from the state who could help us. I don't want to make a bigger problem than we've got, but I'm getting, emails with bullet holes in window seals and things like that. And I realize it's a complicated situation, but I think we just need to we need to continue to remind ourselves that this is unacceptable.
Absolutely unacceptable, and let me say that this is something now almost every community in America is facing, really. Okay. And so we have to lean on each other in terms of looking at the practices that are being utilized that are effective in tracking and predicting and stemming the violence in communities. And I'm glad that the chief has stepped forward with this conversation with the Albemarle Police Department, the two working together, because the crime has no boundaries.
Yeah.
I think that will have some tremendous benefits for us as well. Okay. But I'm having the conversation with the chief about, like, what can we do?
Yeah.
What are the best ideas that we can bring forward? So they are working on that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments at this point? Okay, so let's move on then to community matters. We have 6 pre-registered speakers, leaving 10 slots for additional speakers on community matters. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. We will now open the floor to the pre-registered speakers. Is our first speaker available? Oh, I've got Susan Cruz as my first. Is Ms. Cruz online?
She is.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So good evening. My name is Susan Cruz, and I am the Executive Director of the Community Climate Collaborative, or C3. I've been periodically attending council meetings since 2019, asking for increased attention to our city's climate goals, specifically for creating a climate action plan. Tonight, I want to take a moment to thank you, City Council, the Deputy City Manager, Sam Sanders and Ashley Marshall, and Interim City Manager, Michael Rogers, and City staff, Crystal Rittervold and Susan Elliott, for getting Charlottesville to this critical milestone. We now have a climate action plan to guide the work ahead, and that is indeed something to celebrate. Over the last few months, C3 has been working with a wide range of community partners to provide recommendations to city staff and council as you have developed this plan. We partnered with Cultivate Charlottesville and the Food Justice Network on food justice recommendations, with Livable Seaville on recommendations for municipal gas decarbonizations. Sorry, that's always a mouthful. With Cultivate, Albemarle Housing Improvement Program, Piedmont Housing Alliance, Charlottesville DSA, Loaves and Fishes Food Pantry, Move to Health Equity, and the Food Justice Network on climate smart zoning recommendations, and also transit equity recommendations with more than 24 community partners. We will be providing further comments on corporate sustainability and energy equity in the coming months. While we are very excited to have a plan to work with, I think we could use more definition around the public's ability to provide feedback. Following the staff presentation, my first questions were, is there no formal public comment period? Is council going to vote at some point to adopt this climate action plan? If yes, when? As I mentioned previously, C3 and others have been providing recommendations, but this is the first time that we have seen the city staff's incorporation or exclusion of our comments. We still have not been able to address all topics that we know are critical to climate action. We are so grateful to the city team for their work, and we have no doubt about their deep commitment to climate. Still, I am concerned that no formal public comment period signals to the community that the city will continue to rely on its old ways of planning for climate behind closed doors when the entire community is needed to reach our goals. With that being said, the impacts of climate change are mounting, as was further evidenced by recent hurricanes Fiona and Ian, which devastated Puerto Rico, Florida, and South Carolina in recent weeks. I firmly believe that the city can still provide an opportunity for meaningful input while moving forward with implementation and funding for what staff have presented here tonight. One of the reasons for completing its climate action plan by October was to inform council's budget decisions. C3 recommends that council staff and the city manager's office work together to set clear funding priorities for implementing the climate action plan as soon as possible. We can't afford to lose more time on this, but let's not leave the public behind in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Next up, I have Caetano de Campos Lopez.
Good evening, City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Caetano de Campos Lopez, and I'm also a member of the Community Climate Collaborative. Today, as we celebrate the recent release of Charlottesville Climate Action Plan draft, I want to highlight the following relevant and major commitments established in the Climate Action Plan. Reach 100% carbon neutrality electricity in city-owned buildings and facilities by 2030. Reduce energy consumption by 10% across community buildings by 2030, and aim to for 10% of Charlottesville rooftops solar potential to be installed by 2030. These commitments are evidence of well-conducted behind-the-scenes negotiations between the city's climate team and other cities' departments. However, it's also important to observe that the current version of the Climate Action Plan includes recommendations that are not relevant, which suggests that more and better coordination is still needed with certain departments of the city before this document is considered final. For example, the Climate Action Plan draft includes apparently strong natural gas and public transit recommendations that in reality are redundant from a practical perspective. For example, the natural gas one says, consider a commitment to make Charlottesville gas fully neutral throughout its service territory by 2050. The public transit says, initiate a transit pathways to carbon neutrality by 2050 assessment. These recommendations are redundant because both the city and the county have committed in 2019 to community-wide carbon neutrality goals by 2050. And these goals already imply that from a community-wide perspective, Charlottesville Gas, and CAT will have carbon neutral operations by then. In order to make recommendations relevant, the CAP should offer more clear guidance and milestones as to how and when Charlottesville Gas and CAT should decarbonize their emissions. For example, reduce emissions by X, Y% by 2025, 2030, 2035, so forth. Not only that, but it would also be relevant to set quantifiable metrics for tracking progress and suggest practical strategies for achieving them. In reality, establishing time-bound commitments and determining measurable metrics should be widespread applied in all areas of the plan. For example, again, in transportation, the plan says evaluate and begin integrating electric school buses or increase public transit ridership. Both of these recommendations, as they are, without more clear definitions, might be wrongly interpreted as an attempt to set a powerful goal that in reality is an empty one. My time is ending, so thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. We look forward to collaborating to helping this community have the climate action plan that it needs and deserves.
Thank you. Next up, we have Katie Ebinger.
Hi, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thanks. Good evening. I'm Katie Ebinger, a Charlottesville resident and the climate policy analyst for C3. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak and for the time, commitment, and work that you and the climate team have poured into the Climate Action Plan. It's a really impressive document, and it gives us a good framework to address the climate crisis from here in Charlottesville. The final iteration of the CAP, which we hope to help build here tonight, is our community's opportunity to rapidly shift away from fossil fuel-dependent infrastructure and to use climate action as a vehicle to promote justice. This evening, I want to speak about two topics that sit at that intersection of climate and social justice: energy and transportation. For energy, the CAP draft, among other things, reviews finding a replacement fuel to natural gas and recommends reconsidering the offsets offered by BP. We want to urge focus on person-centered, tangible benefits, such as in the buildings and energy section. We want there to be more specific recommendations around weatherizing homes, electrifying appliances, and adding solar to every eligible rooftop in Charlottesville. In this process, we need to prioritize homes that are the most energy burdened or who may be in need of other repairs like new roofs. At the same time, we need to build battery storage into individual homes or microgrids citywide so that when we have weather events like a lot of the Southeast experienced this weekend, we can minimize losing power. Public transportation is another good example of the intersection of climate and social action. When it works well, it can connect people with their work, their doctor's appointments, maybe even their city council meetings in a safe, fast, and climate-friendly way. We want to drastically reduce trips taken by single occupancy vehicles. So when we prioritize recommendations, let's start with actions like electrifying Charlottesville area transit and creating highly targeted strategies for increasing bikeability and walkability. Pedestrian access is clearly highly valued throughout the report, but when it comes to the recommendations themselves, there are about 1.5 times as many recommendations relating to EV adoption as to pedestrian access. So when we increasing recommendations around pedestrian access will more equitably spend city resources than some existing recommendations in the document, which include things like providing financial incentives for personal EVs, particularly in view of the recently released Inflation Reduction Act. As we decarbonize our city, let's take this as an opportunity to democratize our energy and transportation systems and create transformational changes that address the root causes of climate change. Thanks for your time to speak on this exciting and important issue.
Thank you, Ms. Ebinger. Next, we have Margaret Rose Byrne.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council, for allowing me to speak. My name is Margaret Rose Byrne, and I'm a person with a disability. I live in Albemarle County. I'm particularly interested in the CAP's treatment of public transportation, which I consider essential to meaningful action to address climate change because of the large contribution that our transportation sector makes to area greenhouse gas emissions. Expansion of public transportation and increased ridership is essential to achieving the goals of the Climate Action Plan. One of the constituencies which must be served by public transportation is people with disabilities. Many of them cannot drive because driving requires many physical abilities. They therefore have more need for public transportation than other citizens. They are disproportionately affected when crosswalks near transit stops are absent or inaccessible, and weight limits for vehicles are insufficient to accommodate their mobility equipment, such as power wheelchairs. It has come to my attention that the locations of CAT bus stops sometimes require riders to cross busy streets without a crosswalk. This is hazardous to transit riders and is a disincentive to using CAT. The CAT routes need to have well-placed, accessible crosswalks, not only for people with disabilities, but also for all transit riders and all pedestrians, including children walking to school and people with baby strollers and the elderly. Pedestrians need to stay in the crosswalks. There is recent regulatory action concerning crosswalks and people with disabilities at the federal and state levels. The fact that CAT and Jaunt can accommodate a wheelchair and a rider up to 600 pounds, and therefore can accommodate most power wheelchair users, needs to be publicized to combat disinformation in circulation that CAT and Jaunt do not allow power wheelchair users. Why should you care about a minority of citizens who have disabilities? Well, first, when you consider that most of the elderly have disabilities, there are more of them than you think. Second, adult onset disability can happen to anyone. Old age happens to everyone who does not die young. You'll be on the receiving end of these policies sooner or later, and sooner than you think. Third, AD is not merely a suggestion, is the law. And fourthly, although ADA and ADA are amended relatively recent, the idea that the community includes its most vulnerable members is ancient. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Terry Jo Bichel, if I've pronounced your name correctly. Is she with us?
Mayor Snook, I do not see Terry Jo in the Zoom, but Claire Denton Spalding is.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
Claire Denton Spalding, who I also had on the list, is in the Zoom.
Hello. I signed up for this week by mistake, and I have something for the Community Matters next week.
Okay, we'll get you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the next person I've got on the list is Bill Emery. Is Bill with us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, he is.
Bill, if you're there, we're not hearing you.
I'm getting invited to speak, but I'm not.
Okay.
Bill, you have been unmuted, but you are very, very low.
Let me call back on the phone.
Okay. All right, so while we're waiting for that to happen, is there anyone in the room here who would like to speak on something in part for Community Matters? Note that we've got a public hearing scheduled to talk about the collective bargaining ordinance, also to talk about the air rights conveyance to the University of Virginia for the pedestrian bridge. So if you're here to speak on either of those topics, now is not the time. But if you've got some other topic, I'm not seeing any action here in the room. Has Bill rejoined us by phone?
Mayor Snook, it does not appear just yet.
Is there anybody else online who would like to address us?
James Groves is the next raised hand. James,
All right.
you are on with council.
Good evening. My name is James Groves, city resident and co-chair of the Seaville 100 Climate Coalition. Thanks to the city staff for producing a climate action plan. I sincerely appreciate the work, and I'd like to share a few observations. First, city leadership should note the plan's comments about staffing and funding. Quote, accomplishing these actions will require both staff time and funding resources, both of which are currently constrained, unquote. Without additional investment, the strong ideas in this plan won't be realized. In staffing, the city should hire a data analyst to track progress. I support the plan's equity focus, but wonder why there's no mention of the city's authority to set up its own green bank. The plan hopes Virginia will fund a statewide green bank, but is that realistic given the power balance in Richmond? Separately, for rental equity, consider strategies to spur green leases and similar rental ideas. The plan should push more strongly for electrification. In transportation, the plan says too little about school bus and transit electrification. In buildings and residential, while electric grid resilience concerns are valid, much of our future will be electric, not renewable natural gas or hydrogen. In this area, the city should remove gas system subsidies now. In transportation, the plan has modest suggestions for investments in street infrastructure to support bikes and walking, but no mention of software infrastructure for transportation. In March, Ted Reek of Jaunt organized a presentation on mobility as a service, which would be a great addition to the plan. Elsewhere, the plan extols the benefits of rezoning densification, but does not acknowledge the climate risks, for instance, tree canopy loss and carbon emissions growth from more city residents. Recall Susan Elliott's answer this afternoon to Mayor Snook. Emission reductions in one place can be canceled out by emissions growth elsewhere. Pages 90 and 91 of the plan include good thoughts about how rezoning could support climate action. Finally, the plan could strengthen its emphasis on education, both community-wide and in schools. The city should spark better education that motivates citizens to contribute to the clean energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groves. Is Bill back with us?
Mayor Snook, I see the original instance of Bill Emery in Zoom. I can try and allow that to talk again in case he has joined using the phone.
Sure, let's give him another try there.
And Bill, you will need to unmute.
Oh, write it down.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Technology. I wanted to speak to you this evening about the Rivanna. You know, great cities take care of the rivers. Mayor Snook, you will remember, and Michael Payne will remember when you first were running for council. My first question was, what about the Rivanna? You know, since the early 1990s, people in Charlottesville have asked city planners and political leadership to protect the Rivanna River. The value of the river corridor became abundantly clear during COVID times. Use of the river by residents of the city skyrocketed and has remained high. But sadly, decades of asking for river corridor zoning reform have not prompted action. The results of council and staff's inaction is bearing fruit. The results are bearing fruit now. A corporate entity has filed a site plan with the city of Charlottesville to build 245 apartment units and 2+ acres of asphalt parking in the floodplain just downstream from the Free Bridge. Albemarle County doesn't allow building in the flood stream, but Charlottesville does. I don't mean to portray the unknown developer as misguided, They're just going for the main chance to make some money. What is disgraceful is the city's lack of regard for the importance of this river to its citizenry and the city's failure to plan and enact river corridor zoning. It's critical to avoid negatively affecting the environmental quality of the river system or devaluing the important natural attributes and cultural resources that make our home, Charlottesville, a place worth caring about. I urge the council to avoid this brewing tragedy of the commons situation. Council, please exercise your power of eminent domain. Provide the current owner of the property with just compensation, buy this land, and transfer stewardship of our river to the Department of Parks and Recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emery. Is there anyone else online? We've gone through all of the folks whose names I've got.
Yes, Mayor Snook. Our next raised hand is Robin Hoffman.
All right, Ms. Hoffman.
Hi, everybody. Bill almost said everything I wanted to say, except that I'm sure you all heard about the green space invasion. Not just any green space, it's the green space that pulled us through the pandemic. Let me tell you a story about Jackie Onassis, the first lady who in 1963 was President Kennedy's first lady. And that was, you know, the 35th president, which was just 10 presidents ago. Anyway, Jacqueline passed away in 1994. But her legacy, they named the Central Park Reservoir after her. And that is, by the way, the 5th largest park in New York City, 840 acres, 42 million visitors a year, and most filmed location in the world. It's open 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. And it started in the 1840s where somebody came up with an idea, a proposal, and took 10 years, not like 2 days. And not so good news because they did create a black settlement in eminent domain, but so did a lot of parks. However, Jackie enjoyed jogging, and 2 reasons why they named the reservoir after her. First of all, she was the one who got the historic Grand Central Terminal restored. And then also she protested against the building of the structure that would hinder Central Park's beauty and ecological, any towering building. And now at her death, they did build the towers. And those towers are killing the infrastructure and the ecological health of the whole Central Park. And these towers, by the way, that they built are housing people that aren't even paying taxes. These are internationals that say they only live there for 6 months of the year. My moral of the story here is, let's look at this river in its health at this point that so many people have in Nature's Conservancy, Rivanna River Alliance, the Rivanna River Company have put in native plants constantly, and they're trying to bring back the health. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes time, but certainly not cementing and housing. It's really crazy. You should see the site plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman.
Mayor Snook, the final raised hand I see at the moment is Elizabeth Stark.
All right, Ms. Stark.
Hi, councilors. Thank you for having me on tonight. I know there's a hearing on it later, but I do appreciate your work on the CBO. Related to that, I am a city school parent and a mom to a child at CHS in Walker. My partner and I have spent the past month trying to figure out how to get our kids effectively to and from school, and it has been a major challenge. Currently, my kid from Walker walks over to CHS and we pick up both. We wait in the car line for a half an hour to do that, but that turned out to be the best way to do it for our busy family. One of the things that's happening though is that the children from Walker, when they get out, they're crossing the pedestrian bridge over 250 and entering that 4-lane stop that leads to the Martin Luther King Performing Arts Center. My daughter reports having to run across the road every day to avoid cars hitting her. There are major backups down Grove Road because of that stop sign and people being unable to turn onto 250. I don't think there's anything you can do about that, but I can report that from the from the time Walker gets out at 3:15 until the time CHS gets out, probably around 4:15 or maybe later, that stop sign is very dangerous for students and they're not able to walk across the road the way they should be. Cars are not yielding to them. So I appreciate what you're doing to try to increase bus driver pay and alleviate this situation. Parents like me are in a horrible situation. It's literally taking over an hour of my day. And I'm one of the lucky few who has a flexible schedule so that I can even accommodate doing this. So I appreciated the acting city manager's comments earlier, and I appreciate you raising pay. I hope that a solution happens very soon because the situation is dangerous, as you know, also along Rose Hill Drive for students and cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Anyone else?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands at the moment. I guess a final call to those on Zoom. If you wish to speak, you can press *9 if you're by phone or press the raise hand icon. Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
All right, so that was our final speaker for Community Matters. We will have another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting, as well as on a couple of the action items. We will now move to the action items portion of the agenda, and the first thing up is a public hearing, second reading on air rights conveyance to the University of Virginia for a pedestrian bridge over Emmett Street. Mr. Freeze, is this yours?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So the item before you tonight is a request from the University of Virginia for air rights for a new pedestrian bridge that would run from the under construction Contemplative Commons building on the west side of Emmett Street on UVA campus over Emmett Street to the Newcomb Plaza area. So it's just north of the existing pedestrian bridge. That existing bridge is proposed to be removed. And the reason for the new bridge is that this new bridge would be ADA accessible, and there's significant maintenance issues with the previous bridge. So the proposed bridge is around 23 feet over the road, which easily clears our 16-foot minimum. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions.
And normally, we would have had the public hearing component of this last time the issue was raised, but there was an advertising issue, and to get it right, and so there'd be no question, we've said that the public hearing is tonight. So, anybody have any questions for Mr. Freeze? Councilor McGill, do you have any questions? I can't see.
No, I do not, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I will now open the public hearing. Is there anybody present who would like to speak on the matter? I see nobody present wishing to speak on the matter. Mr. Dillhunt, do we have anybody online who wishes to speak on this?
Yes, Mayor Snook, I see one raised hand, Marta Smythe.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for letting me speak. I wondered if there is any remuneration that the city will gain from this generous offer that we're seeming to accept. I don't oppose the offer, but I think maybe the city should get some money for it. That's all I have. Thank you.
And I didn't catch her name.
Martha Smythe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Does anybody have an answer for Ms. Smythe's question?
So I can speak to that. There's not a direct there's not direct payment related to the air rights conveyance that's being requested, but we down the road at the intersection of Ivy and Emmett, where we have a VDOT funded smart scale project in the works. Part of that project has involved the need for the university to grant an easement or land conveyance to us in order to complete that project. And that is something that UVA has agreed to do and is referenced in the documents that you all received.
Okay, so the quid pro quo isn't monetary, but there's one more in the sort of constant tension over adjusting things on our boundary line with UVA.
Right.
Yeah.
And this would be, even though UVA owns it, this would be open to the public, correct?
I believe the bridge you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, the same as any other part of the campus.
Just looking at the design, it's not one that enters a building and exits a building. So it's, to the extent that the sidewalks there are accessible, yeah, it's accessible to other people. So
The short answer, Councilor McGill, is yes. It's open for people to have access.
To safely cross overhead.
Yeah.
Yes, and again, this new bridge is ADA accessible, whereas the old one includes stairs.
Yeah. So, okay. Councilors, any other questions? Is there a motion on the ordinance? Oh, I'm sorry. We will close the public hearing, there being no other public who wishes to speak on the matter. Thank you. Now, is there a motion on the ordinance?
I move to accept.
Second.
Any discussion? And just to be clear, when you say to accept, there is a resolution, an ordinance set out on page 76 of the materials. That's what we're accepting. Is that correct, Ms. McGill?
I'm looking for it so I can read it.
Oh, you know what? That's the wrong one. That is not the right one.
I've got it. I move the ordinance conveying airspace over Emmett Street to the rector and visitors of the University of Virginia.
Okay, that's as set forth on page 73.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Thomas?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
I need to read one quick thing, please.
Okay.
In the interest of full disclosure relative to this project, I work in the Facilities Management Department at UVA, which is leading this work. I am not directly involved in the project. I do not believe these facts prevent me from voting on this issue, and I vote yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes 5-0. Next item up, request for vacation of unaccepted right-of-way for Oak Street. This is actually a third reading. It was deferred from August 15th, and we've been trying to make sure that we could get everybody able to be present and to participate. So here we are again. Ms. Robertson, are you presenting this officially?
I believe that I am. Good evening, everyone. As noted in your agenda materials, the city has received a request from Portia Boggs and Vignesh Kapusamy, the owners of a lot located at 321 6th Street Southwest. They're asking the city to convey to them a strip of property adjacent to their lot, which was platted many years ago, somewhere around 1888, as part of a 20-foot right-of-way that was identified on that old plat as being Oak Street. The subdivision plat that created that right-of-way was recorded actually in the land records of Albemarle County, and subsequently this area of the city was annexed. Many years later, back in 2010, City Council closed a 77-foot section of that same street, beginning at 6.5 Street Southwest and continuing up to the eastern property line of the lots currently identified as 316 and 322 6.5 Street Southwest. And City Council did not require those landowners to pay for the extra square footage of the land or otherwise to provide any sort of compensation or quid pro quo. The 2010 ordinance by which that vacation was accomplished stated that there were no utility easements within that portion of Oak Street that was closed. So at the current time, there is a portion of the originally platted street that basically goes nowhere. It goes up to the edge of the area that was closed or vacated by City Council in 2010. And the property owners on one side of that platted street are asking for the city to vacate this remaining portion of Oak Street. And in front of you, we have simply passed along the landowner's request for that to happen. And we have given you an ordinance for consideration. The ordinance recommends that if the area is vacated by City Council, that there be an acknowledgement that there is a utility service line that services the property across the street from the applicants, but it is likely, although we're not sure at this point, that that service line is located on the portion of the property that would actually become the property of that that other lot owner if you were to close this. So if City Council vacates the remaining portion of this platted street, half of that street to the center line goes to the applicants who have asked you to do this. The other half of that platted street goes to the owners of the lot opposite the applicant's lot. Over the last 2 times this has been presented to City Council, it has been pointed out that over the years, the city has had different processes or procedures, or perhaps sometimes no real processes and procedures for doing this, and that there is some desire to see a consistent approach taken, in particular a consistent approach to providing information to applicants about why they are receiving responses that they receive, why their application might be rejected, or why their application might have to go through one process versus another. City staff is currently in the process of updating and reviewing all of those procedures that we have. The city does have a number of procedures, but it has become a little bit difficult to follow them because we have one set of procedures that apply to alleys. We may have a different set of procedures that apply to subdivision plats because those subdivision plats may be governed by certain state law procedures related to how you abandon something that was created as part of a subdivision plat. And then there's a different set of procedures that may apply to streets that have already been improved and accepted into the city system for maintenance, that for one reason or another somebody wishes to close or vacate. And the most recent example of that type of request was couple of years ago when there was a request to close Brandon Avenue. So there are a number of different postures in which these cases come forward. And quite frankly, over the years, City Council's own procedures for considering and handling them have changed from time to time, depending on which City Council was in place at the time an application came in. So the staff is working on a set of procedures, but they are not ready yet. So this matter is sort of hanging out there. So from a staff perspective, there's no real firm recommendation one way or another. City Council can approve it. City Council can deny it. City Council can defer it or table it indefinitely. We don't have a specific date in which a completely overhauled new set of procedures might be available. And so we really don't know how you might like to resolve this, but any of those dispositions would be fine from a staff perspective. This is purely a request that serves private interests.
Any questions from Ms. Robertson?
I have one. It's so not all the people who are adjacent to this piece of property are asking for this.
Correct. Just the owner of the lot that touches on the one side of the remaining portion.
So at one point, in order to get at least all people who were adjacent to the property that was being asked to be closed, you had to have a petition with all of the owners who would be touching that property and affected by that sign off that they were in agreement.
So the state law provision that talks about how you vacate a subdivision plat allows for City Council to consider requests for handling requests, to handle those either by adopting an ordinance, which is what's being brought to you here, or by leaving it to landowners to resolve among themselves. So there was a time in the past where the City Council approved procedures allowed people to vacate an area like this if everybody agreed to it. And it was done by collecting signatures, and everybody would execute a deed that would accomplish the transaction. But then at some point along the line, another City Council believed that we shouldn't simply allow people to do this, that the City Council and the city in general has an interest in looking at each one of these from the perspective of whether or not the city might itself have a use for it down the road. And so we stopped allowing people, or stopped offering the procedure by which people could simply bring forward an agreement and a deed that would be signed by everybody to accomplish that without the involvement of City Council.
So the reason I'm asking about this is because I do know some of these border territories become almost community spaces, where one neighbor kind of starts planting a garden, starts putting things in place. And again, until I've made myself really clear about where I stand on the whole process, but in particular, if not all of the property owners, we don't know how that property owner who has not signed on to this is going to be affected. Just want to bring that up.
Seems
Well,
to me that
we do know that half the other half of the alley would go to that person. So to whatever extent, so the other thing to keep in mind here is many of these platted alleys sort of encumber the area with an unperfected right that the city has to use it at some point in the future. But one of the reasons that title goes to the adjacent lot owners is that in many cases, they may already have technically owned title to that land. It's just sort of impressed with, in a lot of cases, not all of them, it's impressed with a right of the city to say, hey, we want to put a public street here. And if and when the city is ready to move forward with that project, the city would be able to perfect its interest and turn that into a street that's owned and constructed by the city. But in many cases, if not most, of the situations in which you're dealing with a plat from the 1800s or early 1900s, while we say title is going to the adjacent lot owners, in many, many cases, they already technically own title. So it's already their property. It's just we're removing the city's unperfected right to claim it to be used as a public street.
Anybody else got a question, comment?
I guess my only question is, yeah, this is something I'll be waiting with great anticipation for these set of rules that are promulgated about this. I know it's got to be a lot, but in this particular case, are the folks that are listed here, are they really super urgent in getting this resolved, or could we wait until these rules have been promulgated, or in other words, can we just defer this for now? And if we deferred it, would the people involved be aggrieved for some reason?
Occasionally when a landowner brings this forward, and you actually had a couple of these earlier this year, occasionally someone says, I'm trying to close on the sale of my property to somebody else, and the title company says this needs to be resolved. So you occasionally run into something like that, but that is not the case here, to my knowledge. If there's an urgency, I have not seen that in any of the correspondence.
I think the property owners in question have a garage that is in that portion of the right-of-way, if I remember correctly.
But that's been there for a while.
Yeah.
And there's no suggestion that the city is about to, start construction of a public street in this area. So
Right.
that's nobody's asking them to take that down.
Right.
I'll just say I would favor just indefinitely deferring it. I feel like for these, it seems like the agenda item that just never goes away. But it seems like to me, just to boil it down, it seems like to me to vote on it, I would need to have a sense, is there any kind of coherent scoring process that is getting at, would this have any negative adverse impact on people's ability to access their property, or potentially in the future any adverse impact on, for example, if someone is going to build like an accessory dwelling unit, these unplatted alleys could be an important part of access to those properties, or an important part of like bike ped infrastructure. And I feel like without any one scoring mechanism, or two, not anything confirming whether every adjacent property is okay with it, it just kind of feels like a little bit flying blind.
Yeah.
Of course, the adjacent property is going to end up getting the other half of it, which includes their own driveway. I acknowledge there could be circumstances that you've raised that could suggest a reason for some caution. Neither of the ones you mentioned are at all likely in this case. We know that the driveway doesn't connect to anything because we already vacated the other half of this road. It is now been vacated and given to the adjoining property owners. And it's not that we need it to get to some affordable dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit, because in fact, the folks who want access to their, they want access to their garage confirmed. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is to give them access to an auxiliary structure. I understand the desire to have a comprehensive scoring system and so on. I also think in this particular case, particularly given we already vacated the back half of this street 12 years ago with no quarrel. I just think we ought to go ahead and do it. But
And just a final thought is one that makes me a little uncomfortable is also that there was a scoring process created in 2018 that we are not following at all. And I don't know how specific or accurate their concern is, but I would just note that the Housing Authority did reach out to me during this conversation to express they had some concern whether it could impact nearby redevelopment, but they have not looked at this specifically, so they're not sure. I don't know how, if it does or not, but I will just note that they did reach out expressing that concern.
The one on Montrose.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'd also just like to point out, and this is part of the reason why there's so much confusion around procedures, because now we have variations of procedures depending on what the nature of the area is. The procedure that has what's called a scoring rubric is only for alleys. It's not for platted public streets. So it's a difficult, it's a fine line to draw, but that scoring rubric was for platted alleys, not for public streets.
So what's the risk if we table this, Mr. Mayor?
If I were the property owner and my garage was on a city street, I would want that situation resolved, and I would think that the 3 months it's been on our agenda was probably time enough for council to figure it out. As far as risk, probably not much, because the city isn't in fact going to do anything. If they want to refinance their property, some title insurance company might sit there and say, hey, wait a minute, your garage, you don't even own your garage. What do you mean? Yeah. The advantage, of course, is that if we dedicate this, if we give it to the folks on either side, we get to collect some tax revenue on it. A couple $100 a year. It's not a huge amount, but it's something.
They built their garage on not their property.
Well, to be clear, it may actually technically be their property. It's just that if and when the city ever decided they wanted to build a street there, they would have had to remove their garage.
Because
so
of the unperfected...
the underlying title to the land may already be with them. It's just they're asking the city to say, hey, effective now and forevermore, the city is giving up its right to put a public street here.
Just as we did for the other half, the 100 feet behind them, so that it would, that at one point this went someplace. It doesn't go anyplace anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a concern with it at first, same thing with Michael about the housing authority, but I don't have that concern anymore, and I'm prepared to support it.
I think in the interest of clearing this from the docket, with the hope and expectation that among all the other incredibly important things that the city attorney's office is working on, we'll get at some point more clear direction on how to handle these things in the future. I move the ordinance closing, vacating, and discontinuing that portion of Oak Street, an unaccepted right-of-way between 6th Street Southwest and 6.5 Street Southwest, adjacent to parcels 98 and 184 on City Real Estate Tax Map 29.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion. Obviously, we've been discussing it in essence for a while, but any further discussion?
So just to remind you then that this is going to set this up, we now are saying that it's also okay to give that land away. Whether, I mean, again, in the past, some people have had to pay for this. This is also just part of why I keep pushing that I don't want to have any of these until we have brought everything together and made it very clear to homeowners what the expectation is. Because otherwise it seems too, anyways.
But in this case, isn't it essentially literally recognizing the facts on the ground? I mean, are we going to ask, in this case, the homeowner to demolish their garage? I guess we could, but I mean, if I saw, like, as the mayor's point, if there was some other place this might get to in the back where this might be like if there was like a real possibility something might happen in the future. I mean, I certainly get the principle of the point you're making about the principle, that we need to get clear on that, but
These are just all over the city. There's a lot more of these than people realize. And they're very confusing. People have built in some of them. People have gardens that take the entire easement up in some places, and it kind of zigzags. It's not just this one parcel, and there's people who have tried over the years to claim the property in between the houses. And it's been very confusing, and it changes, and it depends on where you are in the city sometimes. And I just was hoping, and I know we're going to be working on this for the future, but again, this has changed so much. Sometimes it's you have to pay about $3,000 for the property. Sometimes it's, oh, well, yes, you can just have it for free. And I just think we should have a very clear process, grading system for all of these across the city.
well, let me ask this question. Is it possible to get some sort of, I guess, direction from the city attorney's office about, do you think y'all could have something for us in 2 months for us to sort of approve, and then we can, because I get what Councilor McGill is saying. On the other hand, I feel like we have dragged this on for a while with this particular person, so I want to be sensitive to them. Is it the sort of thing you feel like maybe in 6 weeks you could have something for us to look at?
So let me do this. So there is an approved set of street closing procedures. This current city council isn't the council that approved them, but there is an approved set of procedures in place. What we are trying to figure out and get a sense of is what the current council, how council who's sitting presently wants to handle these things. But maybe what I should do while we're trying to talk amongst ourselves and bring an integrated set of things together is I should send the currently approved procedures to all of you to look at and note for you in those procedures the places at which compensation might be implicated so that you can look at them. And then we can figure out together what needs to be changed, if anything, going forward, or whether the troubles we're having relate to the fact that a lot of these things just don't fit well within just one peg or one hole. So you can have an alley that's a public alley. You can have an alley that's a private alley. You can have a platted street that the city owns title to. You can have a platted street that the city may not own title to. You have streets that have been improved and accepted into the street system that somebody still wants to close. So there are different iterations of things, and I think the main thing that causes confusion is that the circumstances in which alleys are often different from platted streets. It is rare that there is a public alley. It is common that a platted street was in one way or another reserved to be used by the public in the future. So there's just everything doesn't come forward in exactly the same posture. But I can certainly get out to all of you very quickly the collection of the existing procedures with some highlights so that you can see sort of where these gray areas are, and maybe those are what we should focus on in coming up with a procedure that the current city council would like to use throughout your tenure.
You're not referring to tonight because we have a motion on the floor, right?
No, not tonight.
Right,
Not tonight.
okay.
I would like to, I would be particularly curious to know what procedure we were using when the other piece of this section of Oak Street was given to the neighbors. Because if we're looking to try to be consistent, the single greatest example of consistency would be to do the same thing on one half of this alley as we've already done on the other half of the alley.
Okay, I can look to see if I can find the historical materials about which version of the policies were in effect in 2010.
So is it possible to withdraw a motion?
Sure.
I'd like to withdraw the motion that I made.
Okay. How about the seconder? How do you feel about it?
Yes, I mean, that's fine.
All right, so we no longer have a motion on the floor. Do you want to just say we'll continue it generally, or take it up in 2 or 3 months or earlier if we get the answers we're looking for, or
Is it
what's your pleasure?
possible to have this presented as part of the reports in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, or is this not a suitable topic for reports?
With the city manager reports?
No, the reports we get at 4 o'clock.
Oh, yeah, I think we could do that. Would you like to try and do that at your first meeting in November at the reports?
That sounds lovely.
How does that square with what the city manager's office has in mind for us?
That's not an hour, a 90-minute presentation. I don't think. I hope not. So I'm sure we'll make it fit.
Is that enough time for you, Ms. Robertson?
Well, if you're asking, am I going to have a complete overhaul of everything ready? No. If you're asking whether I can give you a presentation that talks about the procedures that you currently have, and that we can discuss what procedures might have been in effect back in 2010 and why there may be different procedures for different situations, yes, absolutely. I can get that together by the first meeting in November.
Okay. That sounds like a plan.
It's fine.
Sounds like, you okay with that, Michael?
Yeah, personally, I would like to discuss it at every council meeting.
All right, I think we'll pass it by for now. However you want to write that up in the minutes, Madam Clerk. Continued to the November, what's that, November 1st?
Continuance.
November 7th? I can't remember.
It's to be tabled. So it's not coming back.
It'll be
for a vote.
tabled, and then the
Yeah.
November meeting will just be a report.
Yeah, okay. And we'll bring it back at some point in the dim distant future. Okay, next item, public hearing and ordinance, city manager's proposed collective bargaining ordinance, second reading. And this is also, will be a public hearing as well.
I like to look at you, but I
Okay.
Mayor and Council, on September 15th, we presented a proposed collective bargaining ordinance. This is a journey that started with me on February 22nd at that meeting where you authorized me to pursue consulting assistance to help frame and shape a collective bargaining ordinance, and we did that. The journey for two of our organizations, the firefighters and the Amalgamated Transit Unit, started before that in the fall of '21. And they've been consistent and diligent, in this process. We presented you an ordinance in September that was, in our judgment, within our capacity to do. As a city of just barely 50,000. And we looked at the jurisdictions that had enacted the law and ordinance. They were all much larger than we, have different economics than we, larger budgets than we. And we proposed shall we say, a walk before we run kind of approach, a more moderate approach. We had a public hearing, and we heard from the public. We heard from our friends in representing the employees. We've had conversations since that time. We've listened to the various points of view. We come to you tonight with a proposed amendment, series of amendments to the September 15th ordinance, proposed ordinance. And those amendments are represented in a document that you received today, and we posted it also, the clerk posted it as a part of the, I guess, a supplement to the agenda. And that executive summary includes 30 amendments that we are proposing to the September 15th ordinance. Some of those amendments came as a result of our listening to the public hearing and our dialogues with you. But I've had the opportunity to meet with the representative, Mr. Ertl, of the Amalgamated Transit Unit, and with Mr. Dorsey, representing the firefighters, and his colleague Scopoletti. And we had a good, frank, robust conversation, and I asked them to, they were appreciative of the progress that we'd made, but they said not quite there. I asked them to prioritize the changes that they wanted, and they came back with 20. And but anyway, we have come tonight with an ordinance proposed that has 30 different amendments to it. It's contained in the document, the executive summary. And the way that I propose that we do this is that there are two motions that have been prepared by the city attorney. One approving the amendments contained in the document, and then approving the ordinance. I think that, as I understand it, we are there, that we didn't agree on everything in our conversations with the union, but I think that, as I understand it, we are pretty good. All right? And so we ask you to adopt this ordinance so that we can move forward with building the infrastructure for collective bargaining in this city. And that includes preparing our managers and supervisors for the new environment that they are going to be working in, and that's going to require some training and education as well. So we submit that for your consideration. If you have any questions, I'm pleased to answer.
Thank you.
And let me say, getting to this point, there were a lot of contributors, all of you, and especially Mr. Mayor, thank you for your diligence on this. You really dove in and helped us through some issues and put a different point of view on it, and that was very helpful in moving this process along. Our team internally, Lisa Robertson and Marianne Hardy, and our outside counsel, Robin Burrows, which I think Robin is on, and Robert Ames and Claude Bailey from Venable, and the department directors that worked with us that were part of the think tank. They all got us here with a lot of hard work. So thank all of them and thank all of you. And if you have any other questions, I'm ready to answer.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm just totally impressed. I just want to say this is what communication, compromise, just good governance looks like, just working through the details. And so I'm totally impressed, and I haven't had time to thoroughly read what you sent this evening, but I'm glad that the representatives are here to show support, that we've worked together. And I know Mayor Snook was on the phone this weekend with individuals like, this. So thank you for your hard work as well on this, Mayor Snook. And I don't have any questions at all. So,
yeah. I mean, I think it would be helpful for the public at some point to see this PowerPoint you put together is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we have to go through it now, but
it's posted.
Yeah, it's posted, but I think it does a very good job just summarizing where things stand. But I don't think we have to go through that now.
If you like, it's Robin Burrows. Mr. Dillahunt, can you promote her?
I am here, Mr. Rogers. Good evening. And good evening to you, City Council.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder, just in the interests of public only, not for my sake, but if you have those PowerPoint, those slides, if you could just take us through them in 5 minutes so people understand basically where we are. I think the public should have some right to see that.
Sure, I can take us through those very quickly. I think someone else might need to put them up.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you to the magical PowerPoint wizards. So as Mr. Rogers was just describing, there was extensive conversation in the revision process, both from the members of the City Council, members of the public, the leadership of the two unions who have brought forth proposals, just from many avenues. We took all that input and additional input from departmental leadership and synthesized all of that into the changes that have been given to you for review tonight. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to try to go speedy, as requested. So in the original ordinance, there were 3 units specified for bargaining: police, fire, and transit. The opportunity to expand the number of those bargaining units was built in after 2 years. Based on those comments, the revised ordinance now has 6 total units: the 3 that we previously presented, police, fire, and transit, as well as labor and trades, administrative and technical, and professional. In an effort to build the city's capacity, we've staged the implementation of these units so that the first 3 would be certified in the initial year of the ordinance, and then the next 3 in subsequent 1 year, each in 1 year after that. And the order in which they would be recognized would be the order basically in which they achieve election. So we're no longer prioritizing any particular employee group, but whoever organizes first will be in that first year, with the others to follow in subsequent years right after. Go ahead to the next one. Thank you. The original ordinance had a basic set of employee and exclusive representative rights that you can kind of see on the left-hand side: the right to organize, form, join, assist, and pay dues to employee organizations, or to refrain from doing those things. The revised ordinance keeps the employee rights that we had previously and then adds these new rights to it. And again, all of this is spelled out with specificity in the ordinance text. This is just to kind of quickly represent what's been added, but one right includes the right to request a representative during a disciplinary interview, the employee option to use city technology for union communications, understanding that the city has other obligations for reviewing and sometimes releasing email. That's up to the employee whether they'll use their city email address for those things or another email address for that purpose. Employees and employee organizations can meet on city premises, and the exclusive representatives have the right to periodically get a list of bargaining unit employees from the city. Go ahead to the next slide. Under the previous version of the ordinance, what would traditionally be called unfair labor practices or prohibited labor practices were all implied in the language of the ordinance and would have been subject to judicial review. Part of what we heard in the revision process was that folks wanted a more specific enumerated list and wanted those to go through an administrative review procedure. So we've added 2 new sections dealing with those. They outline the specific prohibited labor practices, which include, for both sides, bargaining in good faith and a prohibition on discrimination based on union membership. If there's an alleged violation of these prohibited practices, it will go through an administrative hearing and be subject to the limited standard of review that accompanies most arbitration awards. Next slide. Some of the feedback that we heard was that the certification process could be improved. The original certification process required signatures valid for 60 days. And the costs of an election would be borne by the union requesting the election. And in the revised ordinance, signatures are valid going back to any previously held election to sort of counterbalance the length of time that may be, which can be 10, 20 years or longer, depending on how long employees go between elections. We added that employees can be permitted to revoke their signatures if something changes during that lengthy period of time. We provided explicit procedures for runoff elections, and that the cost of the elections will be shared jointly between the city and any prospective unions seeking certification. Next slide. Based on comments that we got, we expanded the authorized subjects of bargaining. Wages, hours, and certain terms and conditions of employment remain subject to bargaining. We've expanded that to include a subset of benefits, including health and dental insurance premiums, deductibles, and co-payments. It also now, although it's not on this slide, includes retirement for active employees is a part of the authorized subjects of bargaining. The revised ordinance expressly allows for official time, which is the kind of common term for when union officials can perform certain work on paid time from the city. The revised ordinance also expands bargaining to allow for negotiation of disciplinary procedures, which includes a grievance procedure to be negotiated by the unions, which may include binding arbitration at the party's choice. And if we go to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little about this difference between grievance resolution and impasse resolution, because in the various conversations that we've had and comments that we've heard, it seems like there was some confusion about the use of arbitration in grievance resolution versus impasse resolution. Resolution of a grievance really looks at the terms of a contract that has already been negotiated. So the types of questions that might come up in a grievance hearing would be, was this specific employee fired for cause? Or did this specific employee receive proper discipline? Or did the employer violate the contract by either doing something or not doing something? For example, offering overtime to one employee, maybe you should have offered it first to another under the terms of the contract. So the contract is already in place, and a grievance arbitration would resolve whether the contract was followed in a particular circumstance. The revised ordinance allows binding arbitration for this left column of disputes, the grievance resolution kinds of disputes, if the parties negotiate it. So the city and the union would have to agree on a grievance procedure, and if they agree that it should include binding arbitration, that would be the procedure used for analysis of that contract with that union. On the right-hand side, impasse resolution is a different kind of dispute resolution, which has a different track for resolution in the ordinance. So for an impasse resolution, the parties have tried to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement, but can't agree about what it should say. And questions in impasse resolution are often, what should the pay rates be? What should the raise be for this next contract? Maybe if the parties can't agree on specific contract language, what should the contract language be about breaks or holidays or the grievance procedure? Those types of things would come up in an impasse resolution if the parties can't negotiate their own end to those. Impasse resolution is in the ordinance, in both the revised ordinance and this and the previous version, under a fact-finding procedure. I think if we go to the next slide, we describe a bit more what that fact-finding procedure looks like. Yes. So under the original ordinance, that fact-finding procedure for impasse resolution ended at the city manager, with him submitting his recommendation to the city council through the budget. The revised ordinance provides both the default that the fact finder's recommendations will be adopted by the parties unless the parties file a dispute. And if there is a dispute, that goes more directly to the city council, who has to, under the ordinance, hold a hearing to resolve those kinds of disputed issues. So if the parties can't decide what the policy should be on breaks, they'll take it to mediation. They'll take that to a fact finder. If they still haven't agreed, the fact finder will have a hearing where they'll hear out, in this example, this side wants this for breaks, the other side wants this for breaks, and we'll make some sort of recommendation about what the outcome of that should be. The city and the union will automatically adopt that recommendation from the fact finder unless one of them files a dispute. A dispute would go to the city council. You guys would get to hold a hearing about what the break policy should be. You'll get a copy of that fact finder's report and those recommendations, and the city council's decision on how to resolve the disputed issue will be final and will be adopted as a part of the collective bargaining agreement. At any point, if the parties want to negotiate an alternate resolution, they can do that. But at the end of the day, the city council would get the final say on what the disputed issue should be. And then that may be the last slide. I think I've sped through very quickly.
Looks like there's one more. It says 9 of 10.
Go ahead. Question.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
so
thank you for this opportunity. It's been my pleasure to really work with you all, and I'm glad to hear that there's that the end product sounds like it's pleasing to a number of the people who had submitted comments.
Pleasing, I won't say. I would say acceptable.
Yeah, well, I just want to second the Vice Mayor. Thank you for all of your hard work on this, and thank you for those who have stuck in here to try to come up with something that's reasonable. I'm prepared to move the...
So this is a public hearing.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
isn't that time to hear from the public if the public wishes to comment?
Yeah. Before I take my seat, let me also thank my two deputies, Sam Sanders and Ashley Marshall, for their help and work on this and holding me up, through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you.
All right, so I will now open the public hearing. Let me ask you, first of all, we're going to alternate between speakers present and online. I will start with speakers present. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on this issue? Mr. Ertl? Okay.
Thank you, members of City Council. My name is John Ertl. I live in Charlottesville, representing the ATU. I just want to say thank you to everybody for their hard work on this. We're very pleased with the outcome of what's happened here. We're very thankful that City Council and the City Manager has seen fit to listen to the frontline workers about what they wanted to see in the ordinance. We heartily endorse this ordinance, and we ask that council vote yes on it. We're very excited about the opportunity to get meaningful union rights here for employees in Charlottesville. It's not everything we wanted, but it's a strong step forward for the city's workers, and it does represent a dramatic improvement over previous drafts that have been done. Getting to this point where we have an ordinance that I think everybody can live with, it was a long journey, but I do think it was worth it. The silver lining is that working together was kind of a good opportunity for us to not only learn the ins and outs of the process, but to also develop our relationship together, one that we hope will continue to work with and develop as we partner with the city to improve civil service here. So in short, we look forward to continuing to work with the city to develop a stronger base for public employment here. I just also want to thank City Council for passing along that raise that was announced today for CAT employees. It's sorely needed. It's a really big deal. People are very excited about it, and again, greatly appreciated by our members. And I want to again thank the City Manager for meeting with us twice, and thank everybody from City Council for their time as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ertl.
Thank you.
And let me just add my own comment that I met with Mr. Ertl and various other members of different unions by Zoom a couple of different times, 2 or 3 times, and none of us in Charlottesville has any experience with public unions and bargaining. And it was very helpful, in my experience, it was very helpful to have John Ertl and his experience to be able to answer honestly with me questions that I had, and I didn't get the sense that I was getting a sales job as much as I was getting an answer. And that was enormously helpful and very, frankly, confidence inspiring for me. So I appreciate what he was able to bring to the process, as I also have appreciated the flexibility and the willingness on the part of the folks at Venable to work with the city manager's office to develop an ordinance that is responsive to what the union folks wanted, what councilors had expressed. It's not always that we work that well together. I'll just leave it at that. And I think I speak for others when I say that. So anyway, Mr. Ertl, thank you so much for your assistance. Let's do our switching thing. Do we have anybody online who wants to speak to us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, Robin Hoffman is the first raised hand.
All right, Ms. Hoffman.
Yay! That's what I want to say to begin with. And then I want to say, Michael Payne, you really did help bring together the teachers and the transit authority on your TV show, CPA TV, and it aired for many, many, many days. And I too appreciated it so much because it was an outcome where I was able to talk about my being able to have some backing and structure for patient care and things like that over my many 45 years of working with patients. That the standards of practice is the main reason why people want to go to work every day, to feel that they have a place that they can be proud of, and finally get benefits. And also any grievance and things like that. They can have arbitrators. I mean, there's so many great things about it, but thank you so much. I didn't think this was going to happen. And I want to say this city council right now, I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Next, we'll come to somebody in the room here. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Dr. Emily Yen. I'm a Charlottesville resident, and I also am a representative from the Virginia Education Association. I am very pleased with the proposed amendments to the ordinance. I appreciate how responsive both the city manager's office as well as city council has been to the public about the concerns of previous iterations of the resolution. I believe that this resolution will greatly benefit the general public in Charlottesville as well as workers, and I'm looking forward to both management and working with the workers to come up with mutually beneficial solutions for that will also benefit the general public. So there's lots of opportunities for win-win-win solutions. And I also appreciate the raise, the pay raise to the school bus drivers, since, as you heard from many members of the public, that there's been a huge issue with transporting children to Charlottesville public schools, and I believe that this is a huge step into helping recruit new drivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have someone online who would like to speak to us next?
Yes, Mayor Snook, Kate Fraley is next.
All right, Ms. Fraley.
And she will be promoted to panelist.
Hi, this is Kate Fraley. I live in Charlottesville, and I first want to thank Councilor Pinkston for having the slideshow shown to the public. Our city manager's original resolution proposed 3 areas of city employment to start. Now it lists 6 and offers certification to the first 3 that become ready. I oppose including the police department in this resolution for the following reasons. Police are the only employees that can carry guns, that can decide to kill people, and can decide to put us in jail. They already have lots of power. The mayor has said no movement can happen on the Marcos Alert program until the new police chief is hired. Why wouldn't that argument be valid in the discussion of a Charlottesville police unit? This first initiative should focus on the lowest paid workers with jobs with the least status or opportunity for future income growth, positions with the least power currently. Police already have employment protections. Unions would go further to decrease police accountability. While the impact of white supremacist in employees has an impact on the entire function of government, in the police department and the criminal justice system is the place where no more severe damage can be made than in that system. It is not appropriate for the police to be part of the first set, and I guess hopefully they won't be, without more public discussion and involvement. It is key that no one has said that they talked to the police department about this, even though you talked to CAT and to the fire department. The police already have the police foundation to support them. They already have the blue code. The police union will interfere with the work of the PCOB. I'm emailing you all right now the links to 2 articles about how bad police unions are. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fraley. I should add that the police, the PBA, sent us a letter on September 6th saying that they would like to be included in this. So whereas it was true in August that they had not formally requested participation, they have now. Who's next here in the room?
How's everybody doing? My name is Jay Dorsey, president of Local 2363. I just want to thank City Council as well as the city manager for coming back with a better ordinance. Our local, we look forward to working with you all, city manager. And once again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for coming back with a better ordinance. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Who's next online?
I see no additional hands at the moment.
All right,
I think, let's see, Brandon Collins just raised his hand.
okay.
Good evening, City Council. My name's Brandon Collins. I'm a lifelong resident of Charlottesville, and for a very long time in life, have supported workers' right to form a union and collectively bargain. This is a much improved ordinance from what was presented a few weeks back, and it's really encouraging. I support this ordinance with the exception of recognizing a police union. For many of the same reasons that were just stated by a previous speaker. The police have to be accountable to the public and to the law, and they've already shown themselves to be quite well representative under the Police Benevolent Association, and that PBA did a serious number on this city and our city government and our police department in the face of reform. And I think I would support removing the police from the collective bargaining ordinance. I also have deep worries about what that means for oversight from the PCOB. With that said, I'm really excited to see this ordinance move forward. I really do hope you consider removing the police from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
And
Saving the best for last.
Well, first, let me say that...
Would you identify yourself, please?
Oh, sorry. My name is Matthew Ray. I'm a current CAT worker at Charlottesville Area Transit. First of all, I'd like to give the council credit, and especially the city manager and our director, Director Garland Williams, who has stepped up yet again, like he did in COVID, working with the city manager to get us a pay increase. It's very significant. I think it's going to really help us get back on track. I think we're starting with the foundation here, and we're going to build it back, and we're going to have a robust, better transit. And I really like to thank the city manager and city council and our director for the efforts that they have made. You know, it wasn't a lot of positivity going, but, you know, today about 3 o'clock, it got extremely positive. So, you know, I appreciate the ordinance and the work that the city manager and our director and city council has put into this. I really appreciate this. I really think this will have future, a future for us with the union. Not just us, but I think it'll maybe trickle down to hopefully to the teachers and to other departments. Having employees having a right in their work is an important thing, and I think y'all did a really good job. I think y'all should be congratulated. I know you don't get it often, but I really appreciate what you've done, and you know, I just hope everybody else follows suit. We're the first public transit, publicly employed transit to have a union. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ray. Okay, do we have anybody online next?
Yes, Mayor Snook. Jeff Fogel is next.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear?
Jeff Fogel.
Okay.
And
Can't hear
Jeff,
you.
you're on with council.
Thank you. I grew up in a union household, and I fully support the unionization of workers, and most particularly public employee workers, given what's happened to manufacturing in this country. But as I said the last time you addressed this, the police union is totally inappropriate. And I'm very disappointed that the city manager did not even respond to the concerns that were raised by community members about police unions. The only response he had was, well, yes, no, the police didn't ask us for this, but a firefighter asked us to include the police. Well, that's preposterous. But what's more important is that the failure to treat us respectfully is an insult. And I think that the people in power in this city have to start to learn that if you want respect, you're going to have to give it. And if we come forward with ideas and proposals and we raise evidence, Lloyd pointed to the fact that there was evidence that where there were police unions, there was an increase in police misconduct. Now, maybe you don't care about police misconduct. Many of us do. And to failure to even talk about it, to consider it, or the failure of the city manager to even respond to that at all is an act of total disrespect. And the people who run the government here, whether it's the legislative branch that you are or the executive branch represented by Mr. Rogers, have to learn, as do the police, that the only way you get respect is to give respect. And the failure of this body and of the city manager's office to deal with these issues, very similar to the failure to deal with the racialized policing in this community. Nobody on this panel or in the city councils, in the city manager's office, have ever responded to the concerns that we've expressed about the fact that 55% of the people being arrested in Charlottesville are black. The fact that we commissioned a study that showed that black people in Charlottesville received more charges than comparably situated white people. That black people in Charlottesville receive more serious charges than comparably situated white people. And therefore, black people go to jail because they are black. And there's been a failure on the part of city government to acknowledge that fact, and those are facts. That's not supposition, that's not rhetoric, those are facts. There's been a failure to recognize that, and what it means is that the city has abandoned any effort to allowed as the 21st century policing model, because you're not following it, except in the rhetoric that you use to introduce things. So if you want to get serious and you want the respect of those of us who work in this city, you're going to have to respect us, and you're going to have to engage in these conversations. Okay, disagree with us, but respect our ideas, or we won't respect yours.
Thank you, Mr. Fogel. Is there anybody else in person? We have no other folks in person. Anybody else online?
I see Elizabeth Stark has a raised hand.
All right, Ms. Stark.
Hi, Council. Hello again. I wanted to thank you for the rewrites that have been made to the CBO, and just to say that I'm grateful that you are considering such a robust ordinance tonight. I know our local union reps and organizers have worked hard for this victory, and I appreciate all the work that the community has put into getting us here. I do want to ask that you exclude police from the ordinance. As others have said tonight, we know that police already have disproportionate power. I think this is clear from some of the drama that we've had with our police chief and the Police Benevolent Association, et cetera. And we also know, as Mr. Fogel just said, that policing is disproportionate in our city. We know that the COB has had a difficult time seeing its work through, and a police union would jeopardize all of this important work that's happening in our community to try to have accountability and equity. Please support city workers, give them the bargaining rights that they need and deserve and have fought for. But also, I ask that you exclude police from this ordinance tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Anybody else online?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing and hear from council. It's with us now.
I don't have any additional comments at this time. I've spoken. I'm supportive of this ordinance.
The one comment that I wanted to make, and I wanted to make it basically because Mr. Fogel specifically directed the comment to me, is that I acknowledge that there are studies that show that in cities that have police unions, there are more problems with police misconduct. However, there's a point at which that sort of reeks of what we would call in the logic world post hoc rationalization. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Fancy way of saying basically don't make the mistake of confusing causation with correlation with causation. I think it's really hard to look at, for example, Minneapolis and say the reason why Minneapolis has more of a history of police violence up there is because they have a union. There's got to be more to it than that. In many cases, what has been the problem has been mandatory arbitration of the grievance procedures, so that if you end up with somebody being fired and you don't like the fact, and the person doesn't like the fact that he or she is being fired, then they have a mandatory arbitration, which can result in the person being put back in, regardless of, in some cases, of what they may actually have done. And so most of the horror stories that I've heard about police officers who have, basically you can't fire a police officer in a big city, the saying goes, is because the unions insist on mandatory arbitration. And it's the arbitration that basically overrules the police chief. It takes away from the police chief the power to run his or her own department. And I think if you want to really try to draw inferences for our experience, we would need to try to be much more careful about comparing the ordinances and understanding what it is in an individual culture that has led to the kinds of problems that are complained of. I had noted before that Charlottesville actually does not have a police violence problem, unlike some of these other jurisdictions. We are certainly the smallest jurisdiction to have a PCOB or anything similar to it in Virginia. There are a few places in other states, but certainly in Virginia. We are also now to be the smallest to have unions. I just think that we have to be very careful about not getting caught up in drawing parallels from very dissimilar places to Charlottesville. And I think we need to have, we should see what's going on in those studies, understand the points being made, but not feel as though we're compelled to follow them, because I just think we're different. We have different experiences, and we are in a different position. And in this particular situation, what happened in August or so of 2021, the reason why the police union, so to speak, the PBA, did what it did really had nothing to do with the fact that they had the power to carry a gun. Had nothing to do with the fact that they had an arrest power. Had nothing to do with the fact that they had the ability to kill people, as Ms. Fraley noted. So I think we make a mistake if we carry that logic to a place that doesn't really fit. So this, all of which is why I am in favor of keeping things as is in terms of the union designations, the unions that we're willing to recognize and to accept. As I noted before, whereas in August when we first were talking about this, the police had not formally requested the right to form a union. They did by a letter to us of September 6th. So that is a little bit different. It's not simply, hey, a firefighter said the police want to have a union. Anyway, those are my comments on the point. I'm in favor of the ordinance. I spent a lot of time with a lot of folks trying to get it right. I think I'm not sure we got it right, but at least we got it pretty good. And sometimes pretty good is about as good as it's going to get in governance. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Ms. McGill, I don't want to overlook you. Do you?
Thank you. Overall, I am concerned about how the disciplinary would potentially work with the PCOB. Again, I'm not sure if that is, how is that envisioned? Has that been taken into account in this ordinance?
I will note.
I don't think it has.
No, I will note there's a section, the following matters shall not be subject to negotiation, includes specifically matters pertaining to the composition, duties, or powers of any civilian review board applicable to police officers or to any decision rendered by such a board.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
PCOB is protected.
I hadn't had a chance to go through some of the rewrites, and I mean, I have hesitancy over that. I don't know if we, there is psychologically someone who carries a certain amount of power. It's just, this is, I had not seen the earlier request from the PCOB, or from the Police Benevolence Association, requesting.
Well, is that the actual union for the police, or
Yes.
is that the PBA?
PBA.
Yeah. Did you have anything else, Councilor McGill?
Have other localities said that certain groups cannot participate within the government aside from the base restriction?
The answer is no.
Yeah, that's correct. The answer is no.
Okay. That's all for right now.
Yeah, I would just generally say, on the matter of police, I mean, we've discussed both publicly and privately as well. As I've said, my position would be to remove them, to give additional special consideration to those issues pertaining to discipline of officers. My understanding is that wasn't the position of the majority of council. I assume that hasn't changed. And as I said in those discussions initially, my core concern is around the Police Civilian Oversight Board and the discipline of officers. I do think that there was consideration to preserving the powers of the PCOB and preventing it from being weakened through a bargaining process, which I do think is critical and critical to highlight, because that means there is a protected mechanism outside of the police department to discipline and hold officers accountable no matter what. And in addition, the structure of this is that we will not be in a situation similar to other big cities which have had a decision forced on them where in exchange for salary and benefit pay, the city decided to basically create a system where officers couldn't be held accountable or fired. Our structure doesn't allow for that. I still think outside of those things, there's concerns. To me, those are the most critical elements because those are the things that could relate to excessive use of force by officers and them not being held accountable. Then I recognize that majority council doesn't agree with that full perspective of giving it more consideration. But I do think there has been real thought given to ensuring that there is still accountability for police, although I know that won't be satisfactory to many people in the community. Outside of that, as others have said, maybe every side doesn't see it this way, but I think this is a real compromise, and there has been real compromise made on the part of the city manager's office and city staff, as well as the unions. And I think this is a complete sea change from the original ordinance that was put in front of us. I think this is much stronger, and it will be a sea change for us locally, but I think it will be for our regional economy as well. We are the second biggest employer in Charlottesville city limits. We're the fifth largest employer in the region. There has really essentially been no union density in our regional economy up until this point. This is a fundamental change for workers and workers' rights for our region. And for everyone who has been coming to city council meetings, rightfully advocating for a strong ordinance, I would say turn to Albemarle County, turn to UVA, turn to our other large regional employers, because there's a new standard for workers' rights and unionization. And beginning today, Albemarle County and UVA are already behind the eight ball on that issue. So while I'm not satisfied with all of it, I recognize where we ended up. And I am prepared to vote in support of it.
So, we have a motion?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to second what everyone else has said. I will also say this. I'm glad that the police have the chance to participate in other opportunities like the rest of the city does. I certainly appreciate the points that have been made about why the police are different, and I think that's why we have a PCOB. And with that said, our police force deserve respect and they deserve support, and they also deserve to be held accountable. But particularly right now at this moment, given the fact that we're down so many officers, what we're seeing in parts of this community is the fact that some people in the community want more police presence. So I'm happy to go ahead and make this motion.
So we have two motions that have to get made. The
Right.
first, I guess we vote on that one, then we take up the second one.
Right, so motion number one, I move to amend the collective bargaining ordinance presented to City Council for first reading on August 15, 2022, to include all of the amendments numbered 1 through 30 as summarized within the executive summary of revisions to draft collective bargaining ordinance.
Second.
Is there a discussion other than what we've already had? Ms. Thomas?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, and then that passes 5-0, and then we have a second motion.
Okay. I move the proposed ordinance to amend Chapter 19 of the City Code to add a new Article 7 authorizing collective bargaining with labor unions or other employee associations as such ordinance has been amended by council.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Ms. Thomas?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
That motion also passes 5-0. You can clap, it's okay.
Yeah.
So it's been a long effort. Thank you all for your persistence and your good faith and your working with us.
Absolutely.
And bringing us along. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is simply, I guess we acknowledge that there was a Land Use Environmental Planning Committee semi-annual report. It's only going to be a written report and nothing further. It's in the materials. Are there any other business items for consideration by council? Nothing else on the agenda? Councilors, any questions for city management to follow up on?
Yes, when it was brought up in public comment, but the East High Street development,
Yes.
I'm very curious for as much follow-up on that as possible, as well as looking at how it compares to our adopted Rivanna River Corridor Plan that's part of the comprehensive plan.
I second that.
Yeah. That sort of burst on us about a week ago. And, you know, one of the questions I've already asked a couple questions of folks in NDS about the way in which our ordinance works, and in particular our floodplain ordinance, and what we need to be doing to understand those issues better. I'm concerned. I'm not going to prejudge the issues because they're, as we found out when we tried to look at Nassau Street, it's a matter that is both state and federal law in addition to our own ordinances, and I really want to make sure I understand the whole package before I start making comments about it all. So I hope we can have some discussion about it. Actually, it's more important that the discussion take place in the Planning Commission, really, because that's where the issue is going to come first. It may never come to us if it's purely a site plan issue, but if it comes up on the Planning Commission docket, I would hope that at least many of us would make sure that we were present for that discussion, because that's going to be an important one. Any other matters? Okay. We are now at the final speaking opportunity for members of the public. Speakers, again, have up to 3 minutes. You can join the speaker queue by selecting the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar, or by pressing *9 if you've joined by phone, or by raising your hand in council chambers. we have no in-person speakers here, so it's all online. Anybody online wish to speak to us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, Kate Fraley will be promoted to panelist.
Okay.
So I'm speaking right now about money. So I've spoken before about, spending money. We seem to do money over and over and over again in the same old way we've already done and without much imagination, in my perception and my opinion. And I read today that Florida was able to use the interest on American Rescue Plan money outside the regulations for the plan money. So my question is Charlottesville earning interest on those funds before they're appropriated, like resolution number 12 of today's agenda? And how much is that? And why aren't we getting interest on it? And then how are we spending it? So Councilor McGill has said one time, I remember saying, there's so many rules about the money. So I'm wondering whether there is any interest money in the city.
Is Mr. Chris Cullinan still on the line?
I do not see Mr. Cullinan in the Zoom.
Okay.
Do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer to that.
Ms. Fraley, I would say let's get the finance people, we can get you an answer to that.
I do know at one point I was at a conference that talked about some of this.
Let me just say I've tried to write to him and I can't seem to get through. So if there's an email address that somebody can tell me, I can write to him directly.
I'll ask him if nothing else, so.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to be able to write to him directly.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Dillahunt, anybody else?
I see no additional hands.
All right. Thank you all very much. We've done good work tonight, and let's go home.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.